All right, guys, welcome back to the podcast. We are One Gen Podcast, and we have a really, really good guest. Aside from my partner here, co-host Larry Wheels, we have one of the most famous, successful bodybuilders of all time, Mr. Shawn Ray.
Saturn boys. I was waiting for the controversial, the guy who's opinionated. That's typically how I'm announced these days.
Well, speaking on that, right?
Go ahead.
No, so you have for many, many years spoken your mind about the bodybuilding industry.
I don't find anything unusual about that other than a lot of guys don't.
But you've been that way through your whole career, even when you were competing.
Yeah.
Let's go back to the competition days, right? So you have more top fives, right, at the Olympia than anybody in the history of bodybuilding.
I never really even paid that a lot of thought. Like, I'm 23 years in retirement, and it seems like I'm being introduced and recognized for having the 12 consecutive top 5 finishes, which now in hindsight, it's a nice bedfellow. I didn't win the contest, but no one else has duplicated that. I mean, Dexter Jackson, for the record, has 21 Mr. Olympia appearances. That's some kind of record that I don't think will ever be beaten. Of course, the consistency was up and down. Mind you, he won that sucker back in 2008. He finished his career in 9th place when he retired, but he also started his career in 9th place when he started for the Olympia run. So what he did to me is nothing short of amazing. But the further away I get from 2001, the more impressive that sounds. 12 top 5 consecutive finishes, because you got guys that are here today and gone tomorrow now. Guys don't have the longevity factor. And to do what I did at the time that I did it, the further away I get from the stage, the more impressive it looks, because those were all pretty much Hall of Fame bodybuilders I was doing that with.
I mean, you were Mr. Consistency, and you would take a lot of slack from some people saying, oh, well, he needs to change this, he needs to change that. Yeah. I was always a fan of your physique. Coming up as a teenager when I was bodybuilding, you were, the pinnacle of your career. And I remember seeing you in Golds and being like, man, this guy's physique is just crazy, right? So symmetrical. What I fell in love with bodybuilding was that physique, right? Your physique, guys like Flex, very balanced physiques. You had a very balanced physique. And I think you, though, brought a certain level of conditioning early on that nobody else was bringing.
Well, what kept me in the game was my conditioning. I was smart enough and wise enough at a young age to look at my predecessors. I studied Muhammad McAway. I studied Lee Labrada. And these guys weren't winning because they were the biggest. Chris Dickerson and Samir Banu, they weren't the biggest. And I thought, they're having a certain measure of success, the ultimate success as far as Dickerson and Banu were concerned. But Labrada was the one that I really had eyes for, because I thought, that's the guy that I've got to get past if I'm going to get in the conversation. Muhammad McAway was kind of on the way out. Mind you, Muhammad McAway was a 2-time Olympia runner-up in 1983 and 1984. He beat Lee Haney in 1983. I'm going to give you a little education. Yeah. But that was when I started, was 1983. So these are little guys that were winning. I mean, Franco Colombo in 81 and Dickerson in 82 and Samir in 83. These guys are my size, my height. So when I actually turned pro by winning the Nationals in 87, I got a little sidetracked because of all the newfound success. I was saying yes to everything, all the guest posing appearances and traveling and the fruits of my labor, and it took me off of what got me there, which was just eat, sleeping, and training. And when I got back to that eat, sleeping, and training and got on that Olympia stage and became a contender, I loved the way it changed my life, the way it made me feel, the way that I was perceived. And it was just me being true to being an artist, not trying to change what got me there. I needed to hang on to what got me there because I beat everybody. And I thought, if I can get back to that condition, and if I can continue the same formula, then I'll have some longevity. And it served me well. Again, I beat everybody except Lee Haney and Dorian Yates. And I watched careers kind of come and go along the way. I watched Flex Wheeler come up behind me and Kevin come up. It's a tough place to be when you see guys that you think are potentially better than you coming up from behind you while you're still trying to chase the champion. I'm chasing down Lee Labrada from 1989, 1990, 91, 90, to 93 when I finally caught him. And then here comes Flex Wheeler in 1993, bodybuilder of the year, wins the USA's, wins the Arnold Classic, wins the Frisco, the Miami show, and I got to deal with this guy coming up behind him. Here comes Kevin Lavroni, the Maryland Muscle Machine in 1992. I mean, there was no room in the 90s to relax because everybody stood an opportunity to like overtake you. And we all took turns beating each other. The only way I knew that I can compete with them was literally spit and polish, being the artist, being true to what I thought bodybuilding was. And that incorporated a lot of what Lee Labrada was. It incorporated a lot of what Muhammad McAway was and Samir Banu, and not changing up with the changing styles. Kevin and Flex and Chris, they all fluctuated with their weight. It was all trial and error for those guys, trying to get bigger, come in smaller. For me, I tried to stay close to my battle weight, which was 212.
Do you think the judging back then was fair, and do you think it's changed at all?
Well, I mean, listen, this is where this opinionated thing comes in with me. It wasn't a question of whether the judging was fair. I fought for equality. I was fighting to have the judges rotated. Like, I knew there was some 60, 70 professional judges, but every time I stood on that Olympia stage, it was the same judge every single year. And it doesn't take a rocket scientist to know that, like, judges don't change their opinions. They like the big guy, they're going to stay with the big guy. They like the small guy, they'll stay with the small guy. But it's very hard to get on stage, look out in the audience, and then look down, and there's the same people that judged you last year. It's almost defeating, because you know you're being served up, and if they don't like what you said in the magazine, because you had to wait for that, and my opinions were something that a lot of people said might have cost me a title or two. Whether they did or didn't, I still felt on and off the stage that if you have different judges, you might wind up with different results. But in the 90s, we had a dictator called Wayne D'Amelia, who was the IFBB vice president, who kind of controlled who was going to be judging the Olympia. And that was the only show I wanted to do. So I knew who was judging the Olympia when I got there. I'm looking at the names going, oh, shit. I had nothing personal against the judges. It's just, I know that when you go to these other bodybuilding shows, these different champions are winning. And like Kevin Levrone said, 2001 press conference to Ronnie Coleman, who's sitting right there, he says, there must be something wrong with the judges judging if everyone's booing. Now, there were several shows where Kevin thought he should have beat Ronnie, but he knew he could never beat Ronnie with the same judges. So I wasn't that far off base, because Ronnie won a couple when he was off. Dorian won a couple when he was off. We don't see that happening today for whatever reason. We've seen this Olympia title change in the last 5 years, probably 4 or 5 times. Yeah. It just wasn't. I came up in that era where that wasn't happening.
Yeah, back in that era, guys would kind of run a dynasty, right? Like they would, once you were at the top, it was hard to knock that guy off.
Yeah.
But also going back to those physiques, right? Like I look at those physiques, and that's what made me want to get into bodybuilding. Mm-hmm. Was like, man, these guys look good in clothes. They look good in the suit. They look good on the beach. Like, this is always a look that I think 99% of the world would look at and say, I want to look like that.
It's funny you say it, because that's not really age related. I'm starting to hear that from the New Jacks coming up right now. That their point of reference is they're looking back. Yeah. They're looking at what was, not what is. And when I came up, I was looking at what Labrada was just wearing in a conversation in the magazines. You know, Tom Platz was selling the dream in the Corvette, driving up and down Santa Monica Boulevard, you know, hair blowing in the wind. You wanted to get to Gold's Gym. Yeah. You wanted to go down there, and Arnold's training out there on Muscle Beach. That kind of sucks you in. And when I was coming up, I'd pay attention to what Bob Paris was wearing in an interview. He's not there in a boat neck, muscle shirt doing an interview. He's dressed for the occasion. And you can kind of hear and see how these guys were moving in the industry. And I thought, they're doing it right. I need to copy that. So I always was ready for an interview. I was always ready for a photo shoot. Tried to control what was being written about myself by actually writing my own articles. I had the platform with Joe Weider to write for Flex and write for Muscle and Fitness, Muscle Mag International, Muscle Development, Ironman. I was doing my own stuff.
Sure.
And so what people were getting was a true reflection of who I was. And I stayed true to that throughout my career as a bodybuilder and in retirement. It's got me in hot water at times because I'm unfiltered. But look, I sleep good at night telling the truth,
Well, then bodybuilding in a certain era started to shift, right? Like, it definitely started to shift. And that was when, let's say, Dorian was winning. And then you get guys like Nasser coming up that were just massive, but not necessarily the most aesthetic. And then you had the Marcus Rules and Greg Kovacs and all these kind of bodies that were just like
scary. For me, they were scary because I came up in the mass monster age, right? Like I actually helped change the format of the prejudging of the Olympia. in the beginning of the Olympia, we all came out and we did our compulsory standing relaxed pose. That was the first thing the judges saw, the entire lineup, and then call you out in groups of 3 or 4. And, I knew I'm at a big disadvantage. If this is the first impression the judges get, and I'm standing next to Nasser and, Dorian, and then there's little Shawn, they're going to have that advantage. I'm going to be playing catch up because at first blush, I just don't look like I even belong in that lineup. So I lobbied to get the first thing the judges and the audience get to see is we're backstage pumping up, doing all the towel pulls and curls. What the audience doesn't see is a big frenzy of us trying to look our best for them to get that first impression. And for many years, we do all this pumping up backstage so we can walk out on stage and slowly deflate. Because all we're doing is standing there. And when you stand there for 45 minutes and then come off and they bring you out one at a time, your muscles just don't pop. Standing, your lower back's tight, your quads are filling in with water because you're trying to stand semi-relaxed, but you're not flexing, you're not posing. So I got the order changed where the first thing they saw is competitor number 1. He walks out and he does his 7 or 8 mandatory poses and he leaves the stage. And the entire lineup does that. Then we come back to stand relaxed and start doing our compulsory posing. That was something that I helped change with the help of Wayne DeMilla and with Joe Weider, because they also found out that it's like ridiculous to have us warm up to then just stand there next to each other.
Well, I feel like in the last couple of years, right, it kept going that way. There's some physiques now, like when I was bodybuilding, I was looking at it and going, I want to look like these guys. Then it hit a certain look where I was like, man, if I have to be that big, I don't think I want to try to compete anymore because it's not even a look that I want to look like.
Yeah,
right?
it became dangerous because people started dying. And when I was coming up, there wasn't people dying. 1 or 2, and it kind of, it makes you do a gut check. We had Mohammed bin Aziza pass away. We had Andreas Munzer. Those were 2 huge names that were at the top of their games when they, were taken down. Mohammed bin Aziza died in 92. The night he won a competition in Holland. And Andreas Munzer, I believe he passed away in 94, 95. I was standing on stage with him at the Arnold Classic. And he's known for being super, super ripped. And everyone was trying to achieve that. And when he passed away, it's like, well, maybe I don't need to get that ripped.
Yeah.
And so we pumped our brakes and we kind of paid more attention to what we were doing, because at any given moment you could be gone like that. I retire and suddenly we got a bodybuilder passing away every month. And sometimes it sounded like it was every week. So I think the get big at all costs, some people kind of pulled back and paid a little bit more attention to what they're doing, because on any given day it could be you.
Well, and in this new era of bodybuilding, right, I feel like the popularity of open bodybuilding started to drop, and the people are the most influential bodybuilder right now is Chris Bumstead.
Yeah.
Right? Because, I believe that's because Chris still has that classic aesthetic.
The classic division was created because we were getting away from what we thought bodybuilding should look like. I mean, Arnold Schwarzenegger would be considered a classic and an open. If you come back and you plop him into our lineup, he still looks like he could, your eyes are going to be drawn to Arnold no matter what, right? You take the 1976, 1975 Arnold, drop him into the present day. He's got the lines, got the look, got the charisma. Bumstead has all of that. I've been saying that for years, that once Bumstead decides to go open, it could change the way we look at what an open bodybuilder should look like. So if you stand him next to Big Ramy and Hadi Chupin and there's Bumstead, no, he's not going to be the biggest guy. But you know what? Frank Zane wasn't the biggest guy. It's who wants to look like who? What do you want? What do you think bodybuilding is? And for me right now, Bumstead does encompass that. I don't even know Bumstead. I've had maybe 2 conversations in my life, but I know what quality looks like, and I also know what I can appreciate. There's some symmetry to it. There's some poetry to it. The small waist, the vacuum, everything kind of flows. He's not Bob Paris. He's got a combination of like Bob Paris and a little bit of Arnold, and he's got that height. I mean, Larry, if you jumped on the stage, you're too small. You got to be another 50 pounds heavier like Samson. And to do that, it's going to be very dangerous. And there's a lot of people that don't want to go into those deep waters. I mean, Bumstead doesn't have to be 250 because he's 6'1". Arnold was 230 pounds at his peak. Bob Paris was 228 pounds. We loved what they presented on the stage, and to alter that with an additional 50 pounds, it's dangerous. And then you also wind up with just slabs of muscle. And is slabs of muscle what we want? I like the beauty of the industry. And he also brings a presentation that when he comes out, I watch him perform. A lot of these other guys come out and they're raising the roof. They're begging for applause. I mean, stomachs are hanging out, and it's a really poor imitation of a posing routine. Almost like we're supposed to applaud for you just because you're standing on stage. I'll applaud when you give me a performance. And I used to do that. Classic is the only division that I would watch for the performance. I don't know why they are putting so much emphasis on their posing where the men's open bodybuilding does not. Can you tell me what Hadi Chupan posed to this year? He was second in the Olympia.
Very true.
I mean, can you tell me what he posed to last year? The year before when he won? I don't remember, and I haven't missed the Mr. Olympia since 1988. And that's a little bit of a kind of a record. It tells you how much of a fan I am, because I retired in 2001. A lot of bodybuilders get away from it for a little bit, go off, do their business, raise their family. I've never missed it since I was in it in 1988, as well as the Arnold Classic in 1989. So I've seen all the posing routines. I can go back to 89, 90, 94, 95, and tell you what some of the guys posed to. I was there this year. I don't remember one song that one open bodybuilder performed to, and I was in the front row. So that's kind of where bodybuilding is as far as presentation.
How do you think social media has impacted up-and-coming bodybuilders versus your generation?
In a good way, because you don't have to be a world champion for people to appreciate what you do, right? I mean, a lot more goes into what you think of a person based on what they put out there, whether it's good, bad, or otherwise. You don't have to be Mr. Olympia. I mean, Chris Bumstead, for what it's worth, is classic Mr. Olympia. But he's not using that title to build his name. He's just Chris Bumstead, right? And anybody, my grandson last night was asking me, is Bumstead going to Hawaii? My show. And then I don't know what Bumstead's doing, but no, he's not coming to Hawaii. But he's 13 years old. Most of the time when I was coming up, you didn't even have the respect of someone unless you were in the magazine. And if you got on the cover, you achieved something. You are somebody. There's some bodybuilders, for example, that didn't win the big shows like Michael Hearn that we would never even hear of because he wasn't competing. And he's made a brand for himself. He's made a living for himself through being a romance novel model, monetizing his social media. I think he's got upwards of a couple million followers yourself. I didn't know who you were until somebody pointed me there, and I go, oh, this guy's pretty strong. But most of the people I knew were world-class champions. And when I came up, I didn't know who you were unless you were Mr. America, Mr. Universe, and that's kind of where the star level was, right? Now, if you do the business, you can build your brand, you can widen your audience, you can be seen in different places, in different countries that you otherwise wouldn't be able to go to because you're handling your social media. I think it's a great tool because you're not waiting to be discovered. You can make your own brand, and that's a good thing. I don't see social media being used negatively other than when people are trying to give you drug advice and they're not qualified to do that.
Did you have any fear in 2001 when you retired about what you do post-retirement? How you sustain the lifestyle?
Good question. Yeah. And it was a slow run-up. Mind you, 2001 was a very frustrating year for me because I was struggling with the concept of like, this is my 13th one. It's my birthday weekend. Same judges. Ronnie's going to win. So when you go into a contest knowing that you're not going to win, it does take a little bit of fun out of it. And when bodybuilding is no longer fun, you got to get out before it becomes work. It was always fun for me. And I always thought there was this much of a chance that I could win. You can't win unless you prepare to compete, regardless of how big they are. Every year, I'm eating my breakfast looking at Kevin Levrone and Flex Wheeler and Dorian and Ron. I know exactly what I'm walking into. None of it scared me. I just thought on any given day it could be my time because it happened in the past. And I saw Muhammad McAway beat Lee Haney, right? I saw Muhammad Benaziza beat Dorian Yates in 1990. I didn't think anything was impossible, but I was making a good living. I had the right brands supporting me, sponsoring. The magazines were in my favor, and I felt like I was more attainable than Ronnie Coleman. I was more attainable than a Dorian Yates. So there's more of a fan base. I was on tour. I was in Italy. I was in Brazil. I was in Mexico. Most of those guys are short. So I was celebrated in those areas. I felt like I was carrying this torch, and the only way that I can keep that momentum was to get back on that stage. But in 2001, a few things happened. One, I was privy to information I probably shouldn't be as a bodybuilder, but Kevin Levrone, I'd found out, didn't sign up for the IFBB Pro card. It's almost a threat. If you don't sign your card, you can be fined like $5,000. To even go on the guest posing circuit, you have to be a member of the IFBB. Otherwise, you can't guest pose at NPC shows. So someone tells me about that, and I found out Kevin didn't sign up. He's a friend of mine. Then I find out that he doesn't even sign the contract to compete in the Olympia because he doesn't know if he's going to do the Olympia. And this is July. The Olympia's in September. All right, there's 2 strikes. Then at the Olympia, I find out that one of the judges is telling me that I haven't changed in 10 years and we're not good enough to beat Ronnie, and that's why Ronnie wins. This is at the press conference. So now I got a biased judge that's in my face. Then we're all kind of arguing, and it started with me talking about getting more prize money for the athletes, getting more rotation and clarity from the judges, more transparency. We want to see the scorecards. And then Wayne D'Amelia tells everybody that, Shawn, if you want to see the scorecards, all you have to do is come to my room. And I'm thinking, why do I got to come to your room to see the scorecard? We're grown men here. Where's the transparency? I got to come to your room to see the scorecard. So I was checking out in 2001. Of course, I wound up in 4th place. And when all the dust settled, the last thing that came to me was that Jay Cutler failed the diuretic test. Now, mind you, I failed the test in 1990. I didn't get the prize money, and I had to get back the trophy. Rules are rules. No problem, no harm, no foul. I came back in 91. They didn't drug test. I won the contest, kept the check. So that's ancient history. Fast forward almost 11 years, and here's Jay Cutler failing the drug test. It's not a question that he failed it. He failed it. But then he threatened to sue the IFBB because of the channels in which they handled the samples or whatever, and they threw the testing out, ignored the situation. Jay Cutler's in 2nd. Guess who was in 3rd? Kevin Levrone. Kevin Levrone wasn't even supposed to be in the damn show. Didn't have a pro card, didn't sign the Olympia contract. So there's a $60,000 payday for Levrone. Guess who wound up in 4th place? I did. Now, I'm in 4th place. I got 2 guys that weren't supposed to be in the contest, or at least disqualified. I should have been 2nd place. When you have all that going on and you're 35, 36 years old, you go, how much longer do you want to play this game, right? Then I look at the score sheet, and I'm looking at the same names I've been talking about the whole time. I said, there's got to be an exit strategy. And that was at a time where I started thinking, you know what? I got the dog. I got the 3 houses. I had a house in Chino Hills. I had a condo out in Newport Beach and a townhouse in Vegas. 2 motorcycles, 3 cars, traveled the world, money in the bank. There's got to be more to life. And in your quiet time, while you're traveling the world, you're in these 5-star hotels and you're being celebrated. I'm watching my nieces and nephews grow up. I'm trying to figure out where am I going to meet somebody? How am I going to meet a girl? I'm in the gym. I'm firing chicks left and right because I got to get ready for this Olympia contest. I just pumped the brakes. I got in the car and drove down and met Joe Weider and told Joe, I said, listen, Joe, I need a break. I've been doing this for 12 consecutive years, 13 Olympias. I've never taken a year off. I need a break. He said, you're right. You need a break. Take a year off. And it was in that year that I wound up meeting my wife, and I got married in 2003. Had my daughter in 2005, and suddenly life took over. And the appearances continued on. I got more creative in the muscle camps. I got more creative in doing the business of bodybuilding, promoting myself as a brand. And the contracts didn't go away. The money didn't stop coming in because I continued to stay in touch with the magazines. I switched from Flex to Muscular Development with Steve Bleckman. I started emceeing the Mr. Olympia. I created the Shawn Ray Pro-Am Classic in Colorado. Phil Heath won that in 06. Kai Green won it in 07. So now I'm a bodybuilding promoter. So everything I was learned in bodybuilding, I started doing. Instead of being a part of it, I started actually being an activist in it. So the fear of walking away disappeared because I stayed busy. I was able to do the things that I always put on hold, and I was able to be present in situations where I would otherwise be looking at the clock because I got to eat, I got to travel, and suddenly I could embrace the idea of like not having this tough exterior of exclusion. I didn't want close friends. I didn't want a girlfriend. I didn't want the distraction. It was like a RoboCop, and the fear of losing the money was replaced with actively going out to try to make the money, and that kept me in the game.
The apple didn't fall far from the tree either. They had his daughter Asia, right?
Yes.
She was like, she was on like a TV show for like dance.
That started with her. She was a guest poser for Lonnie Teeper in Pasadena, and Jay Cutler was a guest poser. She was a national dance champion at 6. The first year that she started dance, she went to Vegas and she became a national champion. I stuck the video. I videotaped the guest posing performance. It was a dance performance.
I won the overall at the show.
In that show? You did?
Show.
Yeah. I forget what year it was. 06, I think it was.
Somewhere.
But so I stuck it up on YouTube, and someone from the Dance Moms saw it, and they contacted us, and they were creating a new show called Abby's Ultimate Dance Competition. And it was for 9-year-olds up to 13-year-olds, and the winner got a $100,000 Joffrey Ballet scholarship. And they wanted to throw this 6-year-old on the show. Well, by the time the show came out, she was 7, and They thought she would be there for a little bit, add a little bit of controversy. She winds up in the top 3. And when she comes off that stage and she's in the top 3, of course, I didn't think she was going to have a chance to win it because it was for 13-year-olds. They took us out the back door and said, hey, we want to create a show for your daughter. It wasn't Dance Moms because that was already in existence. They said, we're going to throw her on Dance Moms to keep her busy, but we want to create a show about what you have here. And it was called Raising Asia. So for one season, she was on Dance Moms to get familiar with the television cameras. And then the year after that, they came into our home for 14 weeks and they showed the life of a dancer who actually, by the time they showed up, she was a singer. And so that dynamic of, raising a kid that's trying to come up in the business, it's, reality TV is not for everyone. Yeah. But conflict and resolution is what it's all about. And my daughter, she kind of shined right through it and got to do her singing and her dancing. It took her all around the world.
Well, she sang the national anthem at the Olympia this year, right?
Yeah, that was her latest thing. She actually, prior to doing the national anthem this year, which, I had goosebumps, man. It was like, I hear her practice. I'm like, shut up, keep that noise down. And then she's out there with 4,000 fans. And, when the national anthem comes on, you're just waiting for the voice to crack or something. And she just powered through it. And, that was a very proud moment. But that's on the heels of her releasing her new album. She dropped an album in August titled Asia Monet. And it's on Spotify and what are the other streaming apps? Apple Music and iTunes. So,
well, you've been one of the few people in this industry. And it's one of the things we like to talk about, right? Because bodybuilding is just, basically a platform for you to be able to. It's in this sport, nobody's going to hand you anything.
No.
Right? And I have a lot of people come to me. I've been coaching now for 25 years. And everybody comes to me and they think, like, if I get a pro card, that's it. Then I'm making it. And I always tell them, like, it may be the worst day of your life when you wake up and realize that nothing changes other than your Instagram handle.
100%.
Right?
Yeah.
And you have to create a path and a career for yourself, but this is the platform to do it. Yeah. You've somehow, in every generation and every phase of this, have been able to do that, right?
Well, because I've had exposure, right? I mean, I started out as a fan of bodybuilding. I was introduced to it by a professional bodybuilder named John Brown, and I saw the finish line. I tell this story at all my seminars. Sometimes it's good to see the finish line because you kind of see how far you have to go. I was 17 years old. This guy's a grown man, 10 years older than me, living in a condo, driving a Mercedes, on the magazine cover, speaking in different languages, traveling the world, dealing with different currencies. And he took me along for that ride. Like I was the bag boy, right? Like I would change the weights. I'd go get the groceries. I would be the messenger boy. And that's a good, like an understudy, because I thought, he's just a professional athlete. Like he's lifting weights for pay. I didn't understand how he was getting paid until I watched and studied. He had to book the appearances. He had to book the flights. He had to know what hotel he was staying in. He had to know who the contest promoter was. He had to know how much money he was going to get paid. He had to know that he's going to bring he had a clothing line. He had his 8x10s. He had his posters. He had all of his merch, right? It's a very much an independent contracting business. You reap what you sow. No one was coming to knock on his door, but I watched him. Back then, they didn't have the internet. We had fax machines. He's faxing all of these people. He's writing these different heads of states that ran the federation. And I saw that at a young age, and it doesn't rub off. He took me in the gym, beat the crap out of me. There were many times I threw up, many times I cried. I've said this on other podcasts. I had to sit and watch. When I crap out on the exercise, it wasn't like, you'll be okay, we'll do it on the next set. It was like, either get out of the gym or go over there or count my reps. And I didn't have anything to kind of relate that to. I was a football player, and I was the MVP 2 years in a row on my football team. I mean, I was the man, and then suddenly I'm relegated to being told to sit in the corner and watch. And unless you've experienced that kind of humiliation, you don't kind of know what it takes to like come back the next day, right? Like I would come back the next day. I just kept coming back. And I think he saw that resilience of coming back to fight again, to where he broke me and then he built me up. And as he gave me this positive affirmation, I started to believe that I could be the teenage national champion. And in 2 years, I was the teenage national champion. Next thing you know, I bought in hook, line, and sinker that I could be a national champion. And at that time, Bob Paris was the 1983 national champion. That's when I started. He was along with Roy Littlemeyer, Charles Glass, Mike Christian, Phil Williams. These are the names that were doing the business. And I'm studying John Aranita in the magazines and just daydreaming about doing this. And then I would see the guys I was coming up against. Eddie Robinson, Franco Santarillo, Shane DeMora, our boy Dave Lieberman. These guys were names that were teenagers on their way up, along with big Victor Richards, who was like, the biggest teenager I'd ever seen at the time. But the more I got, the closer I got to my little goals, the more I would move the goalposts a little bit down. Check that off the box. But it was only because I saw the discipline of what John Brown was doing as a pro bodybuilder. So having a glimpse of it can kind of prepare you for where you want to go. And if it's something that's meant to be, you can manifest that.
Yeah, because I have a specific memory of walking into Bulldog Gym in Glendora when I was like 13. I started training there. And there was a poster on the wall of you in like some striped singlet sitting like on the hood of like a white Lamborghini. Okay. It was like a white Lamborghini or like I forgot, like a
Ferrari Testarossa.
A Ferrari Testarossa. I think it might have been a Ferrari Testarossa. And you're like leaning on the hood of this car. And it was the first like where bodybuilders like, oh, bodybuilders make money.
Yeah.
Right. Like, here's this picture. And that's really what social media is now, right? There's a lot of people that are out there renting Ferraris and stuff to try to make it look like they have this lifestyle. But I remember seeing that and being like, dude, this guy is driving a white Ferrari. And this was like, and this poster was full Miami Vice, bro.
Yeah.
It was like definitely those days, right? And I was just thinking like, man, there's a way to make a living.
Yeah, I understood early on that like I'm the brand, I'm the product. I don't have a manager. Like I got to market myself. I remember watching like the lifestyles of the rich and famous. And when I made my very first video on the VHS tape, it's called Lifestyles of Fit and Famous. And I was literally selling the dream. Like I knew going into making the production of this video that I wanted everybody from around the world to like want to come to California, want to come to Gold's Gym, want to live this lifestyle. And so I was selling it. I was showing you what I was doing as a bodybuilder. I was in college. I was a college student. I had a little a party that they had at a gym. Doug Brignoli, who passed away recently, he had a gym out in Pasadena. He said he was going to have a party with a USC marching band. He said, I'm coming with my cameras. So I went down there. I wanted to show people that I was out and about, and kind of like a ladies' girl at the clubs and stuff. This is before the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air. But by the time the Lifestyles of Fit and Famous video was done, I didn't realize it, but like the people over in Germany, people over in England, people over in Australia, this video was being translated and being distributed all over the world. It kind of took me to a next level of popularity where I made my pro debut at the Pro Ironman, which John Balick promoted, and I won that in 1990, and I wound up going from 13th to 3rd in the Olympia. And that opened up for me the idea that I could pretty much market and promote anything. So I wound up marketing Shawn Ray Muscle Blast gloves, became a rep for Max Muscle clothing gear. I was already working with Weider with the magazines and with the supplement companies. I was endorsing Gold's Gym and then ultimately Powerhouse Gym. Those were things that were coinciding with my success on the stage. So I knew the success on the stage would give me the opportunities. Now, with social media, you don't have to be on the stage. You can create your own universe with social media, whatever that looks like. Because people have a tendency to gravitate towards people based on who they are personality-wise, looks-wise, strength-wise. There's guys out there. I think I saw something with Ronnie Coleman where he's doing cooking with Ronnie Coleman, right? I mean, we look at Ronnie Coleman as the world's strongest bodybuilder, but now he's got the cooking with Ronnie Coleman. You kind of bob and weave and you change with the times. There's an audience for that because people are curious. What the hell is Ronnie Coleman eating these days? And I mentioned Michael Hearn earlier. He's not out there trying to be the romance novel guy, but he's out there doing whatever it takes to keep his audience happy. That's what I like about social media.
Yeah, I had a training partner then in the early 2000s that I thought was the reincarnation, Richard Jones.
Oh, yeah. Richard came up behind me.
Yeah.
2005 USA champion.
Yeah, Richard Jones. When he came out, we were like, oh, this is the new Shawn Ray.
Yeah,
right?
we had a lot of similarities. When he came up and he won his show at the USA's, I drove him to Weider for the first time. He'd never been there because he trained at my gym with Milo Sarchev and myself. And I remember I just bought a Hummer, the Hummer H3. And we were driving down there. I'm preparing him for what he's about to see. I'm already in retirement. My daughter, my wife was pregnant with my daughter. We're driving out there, and he's asking me all these questions about Joe Weider. Turns out Joe Weider's not even there. We wound up meeting with Peter McGough. And by the time we walked out, he wound up getting a 2-year contract. We went in there to get 1 year. He wound up with a 2-year contract. And he was everything at the time that I used to be. So he was Shawn Ray light. but he's way smarter. The guy was very cerebral. He had a very short run as a bodybuilder, and he became a cop, I think. He became a security specialist, one of those, I don't want to say a militia guy, but some type of armed specialist type person. Bodybuilding was something that he just did because he was good at it, but he didn't live and breathe it like I did, which is why he couldn't go all the way to the top. Had potential, though.
If they had Classic at that time,
he would have been perfect.
He would have been the Mr. Olympian Classic. Yeah. So now that being said, with the current bodybuilding this year, a lot of drama out there with like certain guys like Nick Walker pulling out of the Olympia.
Yeah.
And then a new champion, right? Sam. And then we got the brand new champion, the monster, right? Shows up. So do you think they got it right this year?
I thought they got it right. I actually predicted it back in March. And so I had to find the clip where I was talking to Chris Cormier back at, I think it was the LA Fit Expo, where I was predicting that Samson was ripe for this title, only if he puts his mind to it and he stays lighter and trains closer to his weight. He's got the best physique. He wasn't the hardest. He wasn't the most ripped, but it's not a contest of being the hardest and most ripped. Otherwise, Ronnie would have lost a few times, and so would have Dorian. They weren't always the hardest and the most ripped. There were times that they were, and they were rewarded. But even when they weren't, they still won. So I want to get that on record, that Hadi didn't lose simply because he was harder from the front and not harder from the back. I think Hadi lost to the better shaped structural physique of the most complete bodybuilder on the stage. I'd love to see Samson harder, but then he probably wouldn't have the roundness and the fullness. But that wasn't an upset. That was something that I thought was always going to happen because he had the best body. And I think by him competing over in Paris like a week or two before served him well, because he was able to go through that whole diet down, dry out, go through the rigors of a contest, and then glide into the Mr. Olympia. I don't think it was as close as people said it was. I had Samson from beginning to the end. I thought the most improved guy was that guy that got fourth place.
Yeah.
He surprised a few people. I actually thought he was fighting it out for third place. The question is whether or not Hadi will ever be able to win that title again. That's a big ask. That's why, I'm catching flack for saying that Samson should retire. But they're not understanding where I'm coming from in saying that. Because, Moore's, you get a little bit, you think more is better. There's nowhere for Samson to go but down. Him being a two-time champion is going to be as impressive as Rami being a two-time champion. I mean, he won it, then he won it again to validate it, but it was short-lived. No one's talking about Big Rami anymore. I think Samson's done everything that every bodybuilder wants to do. He's 38 years old. I'd mentioned that he should go on tour, show off that gold Sandow trophy because there's only two of them. Phil Heath has one. He didn't do the tour, Phil Heath. Samson can go out there and set himself up for life after, preserve his health, preserve injury, and be a great ambassador and make that transfer into, 40 is going to be right around the corner. Or he can come back, and you can run the risk of losing it. And sometimes when you lose it, you can never get it back. And right now, I guarantee you, Derek and Hadi are both wondering, are they ever going to get it back again? Dexter Jackson never did. He won it in 2008, beat the defending champion, Jay Cutler, and he never got it back. He competed from 2008 up until 2021, Dexter, chasing that. So my logic is, you've won the highest show there is in the land. You're 38 years old. You got to find your way off the stage. Is it ever going to be the right time? It's hard to leave on top. Only one person ever did that, and he was 31 years old. That was Lee Haney. That's the hardest thing to do, is to leave on top. Barry Sanders is the other one in football. He walked away from football, peak of his career, waiting for a new contract, but he's healthy. Both knees are intact, shoulders are intact. Ronnie Coleman didn't leave on top. Ronnie Coleman left and put himself in harm's way. I don't want to see that happen, Samson.
You never suffered really any big injuries?
No, knock on wood, I didn't. But again, I didn't come from the powerlifting background. I think when you come from that feeling of strength and power, that the longer you do it, the only thing that's waiting for you is injury. And so I was a physique artist, which is why you never saw Muhammad McAway and Lee Labrada get hurt. Even Bob Paris. I didn't want to put myself in the deep end of the pool. I didn't have to. So I think that sometimes as you age, you think you can do things longer than your body will allow you to do it. And then you wind up retiring due to injury. It happens in boxing, happens in football. It's tough to walk away intact. And I was always afraid of the weights in terms of, this is going to cost me, it's going to hurt me, it's going to injure me. And when you see somebody tear their bicep, you see someone tear their pec, you see someone tear their quadricep, You know people that have back injuries. I'm just saying, it comes at a risk because like race car driving. Most race car drivers, if they wind up dying, they die in a race car, right? I mean, it's a glorious death. They died doing what they love. I don't want to be that guy that goes down and can't come back up on that squat. I don't want to be the guy that something moves, and when you've seen it, it can put the fear in you. When you become afraid of the weights, that's when you need to back away from it.
Yeah, I didn't squat for like 6 months after Fuchs. You know,
he was squatting in the same squat rack that in my gym. It was Milos's gym. He owned it, but that was my squat rack. That's where I built my physique. And so when he came in to shoot photographs with Chris Lund that day, I happened not to be at the gym, but seeing what can happen by putting on too much weight, he wasn't foolish because he said he'd done that weight before. And when you do that kind of weight, and you keep tempting fate, shit can happen. I think he said that he wasn't fully warmed up, but he went all the way down and he fell backwards and both quads were torn. The crazy part is he was able to come back and get on a bodybuilding stage. I mean, that was a huge round of applause for him to do it. He didn't bust a grape, right? He got beat by everybody. And to this day, I think he still has some complications from that injury. I was kind of afraid of getting hurt, so I walked away.
So now that we got the biggest topic right now in bodybuilding this week, right, is that Chris Bumstead.
Oh, I thought you were going to say the Shawn Ray Hawaiian Classic.
Well,
Go ahead.
That's
coming up next week.
That's coming. Bumstead
yes.
announced, after he announced his retirement, that he's jumping into one last show in the open division. Does he have a shot at winning?
I said he did. But then he made a post that he's just doing it to have fun. You don't do bodybuilding to have fun, not with professionals. This kid that we were talking about that was in fourth, his name slips my mind. Fourth in the Olympia.
Yeah, I know.
You know who I'm talking about.
Yeah.
Larry, come on, help me out here. I'm usually pretty good with names. I know the internet will tear me up on that one, but the guy that was fourth place at the Mr. Olympia, the guy that should have beat Nick Walker in New York, second place. The newest up-and-coming guy, we're going to get his name right, especially if he wins in Prague. But he's a real bodybuilder, and he's a legitimate threat to win that title. Chris made a comment that he just wants to have fun. He wants to experience it. I didn't think he had that mindset. I thought, like, if he's going to Prague, he's all in. Like, he's opening the door, a possibility that if he wins in Prague and qualifies for the Olympia in 25, maybe that's the storybook ending, where he's going to listen to what I've been saying the last 3 years I've been saying it, stand him next to the champion, make the judges make the tough decision of whether or not they want to change the look of what Mr. Olympia looks like. Reimagining what Mr. Olympia looks like means you have to have an alternative. Like Muhammad Makaway, Lee Labrada, myself, we were the alternative to Lee Haney, Dorian Yates, and Ronnie Coleman. They made their decision to stay with the big mass monsters. 22 years of Mr. Olympia titles between three guys. Chris can flip this whole script. The most popular guy, the judges are the ones that put him first 6 years in a row. The fans, 20 million strong, are telling him that he's the guy that they want. Get qualified for the Olympia and make the judges decide whether or not you are the man. Because he's never going to really be the man until he beats the man. And if it's me, that would be my last song and dance in bodybuilding, because really there's nothing else to prove. If he could go up there into the open and win. Now he's going to take a test run in Prague, and he's going there to have fun. I got
Fitzwater.
Martin Fitzwater. We will never forget that name, Martin Fitzwater, Rookie of the Year. I think that Bumstead, if he's going to Prague to have fun, it's not going to have a lot of fun. Because when you go on stage and it's a good old time, it's not fun. You standing on stage, being judged by people, pictures that are going to last forever, losing. I've always said second place sucks. You're right there. He might get second place in this show. He's got to realize that after being a winner for 6 straight years, second place sucks. He's used to being a winner. And if you're going to win, you got to sell out. You got to go balls to the walls. There's nothing fun about getting ready for a show. So I don't know how serious he's taking it, but going up on a pro stage to have fun, get second place, have people tell you, you know what, you don't belong in that division, what a mistake that was. It's not going to be a good feeling for Chris if he's not 100% in the game. But he does have a slight percentage of winning because I still like the way he looks.
I think he can do it. With that being said, you just brought it up. So you've transitioned from bodybuilder to, writing in the magazines, and now, you've been promoting your show. And you have the Shawn Ray Hawaiian Classic.
Yeah, I think it's a little bit more rewarding being a promoter unless you've experienced it, because all the things I complained about with the judges, with the prize money, with the venues, with the trophies, I'm able to control that. And I've got the biggest show 7 consecutive years in Hawaii, 6 hours across the Pacific Ocean. So my passion runs deep. I was brought there in 1988 by the late Dot and Mitz Kawashima. And when I went there, it was like a rock star. They were partners with Arnold Schwarzenegger at the time. And that Hawaiian experience had never left me. And I remember Arnold said something very profound. He said when he's done bodybuilding, he wants to go back to Columbus, Ohio and partner up with the promoter of that show, Bob Lorimer, Jim Lorimer, Bob's his son, in 1975, where they had the Mr. Olympia competition. He said, when I retire, I want to come back and be your partner. I love what you're doing. And he did. He's got the Arnold Classic for 35, 36 years. He's got the biggest show, 200,000 people, 22,000 athletes. I mean, it's just a freaking monstrosity. And I was there at the first one when he did it. He made true to his promise that he would come back. 1980 was his last Olympia. Then he went into, he had some movies, married a Kennedy, and did all that stuff. But he came back in 89. And when my phone rang at my mom's house asking me to be in the first Arnold Classic, I mean, that changed the game for me. But I think it planted a seed in my mind where I was going to wind up. And winding up becoming a bodybuilding promoter in 2006 in Denver was the transition of following into kind of like, manifesting the Arnold Schwarzenegger in me. And how ironic is it that I'm partners with his late partners in Hawaii, putting on a contest that bears my name, taking everything I know about the Arnold Classic, everything I remember about Dot and Mitz Kawashima, bringing my Olympia experience, and from an athlete's perspective, knowing what the athletes want, need, and desire on that stage, it feels really good to watch it come together. It's kind of like a symphony, right? You have to have everybody playing in sync. And I have to bring in my judges from the mainland. I've got to ship over the trophies over there, bring in special guests, come up with certain awards, bring in my sponsors. There's a lot of moving parts, but when you do it in paradise, it's not work. So I actually become a little bit depressed when it's over because I start working on it in January. It takes a full year to do.
I've been to your show in Hawaii, and the coolest part about shows in Hawaii, if you've never been, is the fans.
Yes.
The fans get nuts. Hawaiian fans are on their feet yelling and screaming. The energy's amazing. So that is next week, right?
Yeah, we got Pro Bikini and Pro Men's Physique. They're both Olympia qualifiers. It's actually a national qualifier for the NPC. And this is the first time I'm having men's physique. Last year I had men's classic physique, and I also had women's wellness. So I'm kind of moving around and bringing different divisions so they can actually see it, because it's an island, right? They haven't had pro bodybuilding over there in forever. My challenge is whether or not the bodybuilders would come. We're in a situation that's so saturated that the bodybuilders can pick and choose where they want to go. And so if I have pro bodybuilding in Hawaii, they're going to look at the prize money. They're going to look at the travel distance. They're going to get fickle about it. And I can't put on a pro bodybuilding show and have 5 people show up. And that's where we're at, where these bodybuilders have so many choices of shows to compete in that if it's not convenient for them, they're not going to go. So I'm going to do it for the people that want to compete, the people that, love it. And that's a great place for bikini and men's physique.
Yeah, absolutely. So is there anything else right now you're working on, anything you want to talk about?
Yeah, one of the big things, I just signed a deal with Panada Equipment Company, Rudy Panada, who I met back in 1989, sitting in the audience of the Olympia. I was suspended that year by Wayne D'Amelia for getting injured. Got injured getting ready for the Arnold Classic, and they suspended me for a year. I still can't believe that happened. But as fate would have it, Rudy Panada was there in 1989 in Italy, and we connected back here in Dubai, and now I'm an official representative for him, joining Phil Heath and Bob Ciccarillo and Big Ramy, and now Lee Haney's coming into the fray, working with Panada. That's a big deal for me because I've always kind of had my hands along with some equipment companies that just never really panned out. But this is the first time I'm actually getting the equipment of my own, not to rival your gym. I'm not sure. I'm not there yet in the gym business, but it's one thing I've never done, so I might be kind of dabbling in that in the near future. Outside of that, I'm enjoying my time traveling the world, still being an ambassador. I remember a long time ago when I got started, I heard Ben Wieters say this to someone. He said he's a missionary for bodybuilding. And then I put some perspective on that because I was the one that presented Eugene Sandow trophy to Eugene Sandow's great-great-grandson in Liverpool, England. I actually gave him the trophy. He'd never had one. And when I handed that to him, I remember Ben Wieters saying that. I thought, what does that mean, being a missionary for bodybuilding? And I started thinking about the time that he was being a missionary, what the planes must have looked like, how the travel used to be, and the things that he had to go through to spread the concept of bodybuilding in all these different countries. And he was everywhere. He's the one that laid the foundation for the birth of the NPC, which started in 1982. And I'm all over the place talking about bodybuilding, health and fitness, Olympia brand. I'm working with a supplement company called Mutant. They're in over 100 countries. So I am an extension of all of that stuff, trying to recruit people into our industry and then networking my contacts so we can give back. And when you give back, you get more. And the older you get, the more you start to understand that concept. As a bodybuilder, you understand one thing: the next meal, the next 3 hours, the next workout, the next competition. When you get outside of that, you start to see how big things are. And I've been around so long that I can see and appreciate now what Jay Cutler's doing, what Phil Heath is doing, what Ronnie Coleman's doing, Kevin Levrone. These guys are still relevant because they're doing exactly what I'm doing. They were teenage champions when I came up. And when you start thinking about that, that's 40 years. That's 40 years of being in the game, never leaving the game. Some of these guys got injured. Some of these guys had families. Some of these guys went away and came back. But even Labrada, flying out to Labrada's nutrition factory out in Texas to do a podcast to talk about his upcoming documentary as well. So we're all kind of getting old at the same time, but we've all turned into missionaries for bodybuilding as a result of what Ben Weider did.
Well, you have been a true legend in the sport. It's surreal for me to have you in here, being a fan for many, many years. And we appreciate what you've done for bodybuilding. Guys like you, it's given me a career, right? It's allowed people like me and Larry to, you put the, you laid the groundwork for what the industry is now.
You got to have thick skin when you do that, because not everybody has the same appreciation, right? I mean, you can't do everything right. And with social media, they can cherry pick what they like about you and what they don't like about you. And I made a comment about Nick Walker. They said, well, what does Nick Walker have to do to get it back? I said, he has to put down his phone, right? You got to get off social media, or just don't read the social media. Produce your content. But everybody with an opinion now can put it out there into the universe. And not everybody, no matter how good you are, can digest that. I never give a shit what anybody ever said about me, because most of them are strangers. I'll never meet them. I don't know who they are. And the ones that I do know, I take note, and I keep them at arm's length, but I keep, nothing ruins their day more than success. Seeing me continually doing what I do best, which is evolving, promoting, and marketing myself. It drives them freaking nuts. But social media can be the death of some of these bodybuilders when they continue to read the comments, especially the negative comments. And my advice to Nick Walker when he decided not to do the Olympia was stay off social media, or either regulate the social media to a point where you give us what you want us to see. You don't need to get sucked up in what you think people think of you. So for me to stay alive in this business, is they need to understand I don't think anything of people that come at me with the negativity. It doesn't have time to manifest itself. So that's why I'm able to keep running my mouth.
That's great advice. That's great advice.
Don't read the comments.
All right, guys. Thanks for tuning in to One Gen Podcast. Shawn, thank you for coming all this way.
Absolutely.
And if you guys want to see more, stay tuned. We have many more episodes in the bank. See you in the next one.